It was supposed to be one of the safest towns in America, the kind of place where parents left their doors unlocked and kids rode their bikes until sunset. But on one quiet spring evening in 1990, that illusion shattered. A 9-year-old girl disappeared on her way to buy candy just 1 block from home. And what happened next would become one of the darkest crimes in South Dakota's history. For more than 20 years, one man sat on death row, swearing he was innocent. Until one day, he wasn't. This is the story of how a small act of trust led to a crime so horrific the entire state would never forget it, and how the man responsible faced justice in the most chilling way imaginable. Sioux Falls wasn't the kind of place where people locked their doors at night. It was quiet, predictable. A town where everyone knew each other's names and strangers waved from across the street. That's exactly why Tina Curl had moved there. After years in New York, she wanted peace, a fresh start, a place where her 9-year-old daughter, Becky O'Connell, could grow up safe and happy. Becky was full of life, the kind of kid who'd make friends with anyone, always asking questions, always smiling. She and her mum were inseparable. If Tina wasn't at work, she was with Becky. But sometimes the places that feel the safest are the ones that catch you off guard. Because just 2 months after arriving in Sioux Falls, everything Tina believed about safety and about people would be torn apart forever. It was May 8th, 1990, a calm evening like any other. The air was warm, the streets quiet. Inside their small home, Becky had one simple plan. She wanted to make lemonade. She grabbed a few coins, smiled at her mum, and told her she was just running to the corner store for sugar and candy. It was barely a block away, a trip she'd made before. Harmless, ordinary. But when minutes turned into half an hour, that ordinary night began to feel wrong. Tina stepped outside, calling her daughter's name down the empty street. No answer. Neighbours joined in. Porch lights flicked on. Voices echoed through the neighbourhood. "Becky!" Over and over again. An hour passed. Still nothing. When the police arrived, instead of organising a search, they started asking questions Tina never expected. Did she run away? Was she upset? Each one felt like a punch to the chest. And then the storm rolled in. Heavy rain, thunder, darkness, washing away tracks, clues, and hope. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Tina already knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. The next morning, the search began at first light. Volunteers, officers and neighbours spread through fields, ditches and wooded trails, every minute feeling heavier than the last. Then, just after dawn, 2 men riding their ATVs through a quiet area near the Big Sioux River stopped. Something in the brush caught their attention. What they found ended the search and broke a community. 9-year-old Becky O'Connell had been found in a wooded area near Lake Alvin. What was supposed to be the safest place in the state had just become the scene of its most horrifying crime. For investigators, the scene was chaos. Rain had washed away footprints, tyre tracks, everything that might have told them who did this. But one thing was clear. Whoever was responsible hadn't acted on impulse. This was planned, calculated, and somewhere nearby, that person was still free. Detectives moved fast. They canvassed every house, every business, every face that might have seen a little girl that night. The last confirmed sighting placed Becky at the small neighbourhood convenience store, buying sugar and candy, just like she'd told her mum. But then came something unsettling. A witness mentioned seeing a pickup truck parked nearby, old, mud-covered, out of place in that tidy neighbourhood. Detective Mike Larson followed that lead, driving the same roads Becky had walked. And just a few blocks from where she disappeared, he saw it. The same kind of pickup, sitting in a driveway, still caked in mud. The truck belonged to a man named Donald Eugene Moeller, a quiet, unassuming local with a record that was anything but ordinary. Larson ran his name through the system, and what came back turned the investigation upside down. Moeller had been arrested before, for violent assaults, even against minors. He lived just a few hundred feet from where Becky vanished. To police, it no longer felt like a mystery. It felt like a race, to find the man they were now sure had taken her, before he disappeared again. Moeller didn't wait to be caught. The moment police closed in, he vanished. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and every lead seemed to run cold. He slipped across state lines, living under a false name in Tacoma, Washington. For a while, he was invisible, just another face in the crowd. But mistakes have a way of catching up. In January 1991, Moeller was arrested for possession of stolen property. He gave the police a fake identity, and for a month the manhunt continued, thinking he was someone else entirely. It wasn't long before Tacoma detectives dug deeper and finally uncovered the truth. Moeller wasn't just a petty criminal. He was the man South Dakota had been searching for, the one responsible for destroying a little girl's life. In February 1991, Donald Eugene Moeller was extradited back to South Dakota. After 9 months on the run, the hunter had become the hunted, and for the first time it seemed like justice might finally catch up with him. The trial began in July 1992, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Every detail of Becky's final hours was laid bare, piece by piece, in front of the jury. DNA evidence became the backbone of the case. The science was clear, almost impossibly precise. The likelihood of the blood on Becky's body matching anyone else was 1 in 130 million. There was no room for doubt. Prosecutors offered Moeller a chance to plead guilty in exchange for life in prison. But he refused. Not guilty. Not responsible. On September 1st, 1992, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty. 2 days later, the same jury sentenced him to death. The first death sentence South Dakota had issued since the law was reinstated in 1979. For the next 2 decades, Moeller clung to appeals, insisting he was innocent. But no legal maneuver could erase the evidence, the witnesses, or the heartbreak he had caused. Justice, it seemed, would not come quickly. But it was coming. For more than 20 years, Donald Eugene Moeller sat on death row, denying what everyone knew to be true. Appeals, legal motions, claims of innocence, each one prolonging the inevitable. Then, in July 2012, everything changed. Moeller confessed. For the first time, he admitted what he had done. He kidnapped and murdered 9-year-old Becky O'Connell. "I killed. I deserved to be executed," he told the court, cold and unflinching. South Dakota set an execution window, late October 2012. Meanwhile, Becky's mother, Tina Curl, travelled over 1,400 miles from New York to witness the moment justice would finally be carried out. On October 30th, 2012, Moeller, 60 years old, faced the lethal injection. Alone, isolated, his final hours passed in silence. He was pronounced dead at 10:24 p.m. For Tina, the moment was bittersweet. She had seen justice done, but she knew grief was far from over. Standing at the glass, she held a photo of her daughter, imagining the life Becky never got to live. The man who had destroyed a family, a town, and a childhood was gone. But the memory of that crime and the scars it left would linger forever. Becky O'Connell's life was stolen, but her memory became a quiet force that refused to fade. Her mother, Tina Curl, returned home carrying the weight of grief and the knowledge that justice had finally been served. She displayed a photograph of Becky at 9, beside a portrait imagining the life she might have lived. For Tina and her family, the execution of Moeller was not closure. It was a moment of reckoning, a reminder that evil exists, but so does accountability. South Dakota would remember the case for generations, a cautionary tale about safety, trust, and the fragile innocence of childhood. Justice had caught up with one man, but the story left a deeper question lingering in every heart that heard it. How do we protect what is most precious, when even the safest places can harbour unspeakable darkness? Becky's life was brief, but her story continues. A reminder, a warning, and a memory that refuses to be forgotten.